goal in life is to let people like that feel that they can't do it, show them that you can, like to really simplify the process from the beginning and show you like just through practice you can get there. And
hey, I'm Becca with the Happy Ever Crafter, and in this week's video, I'm talking to Stephanie Fehrenbach. And for those of you who have been around, been viewers of the show for a while, you know that Steph has been here before, and I'm sure she will be here again in the future. But Steph is a wonderful watercolor artist. Well, she's an artist of a lot of other things too, but she teaches us watercolor. And today she's teaching us how to do a beautiful floral wreath. The one thing I want to mention before we jump in is that if you are a person who has never done any watercolor before, if jumping right into doing a wreath is going to overwhelm you, I want you to stop the video and go to www.showmeyourflorals.com and sign up, because we're doing a free 1-week watercolor basics challenge where Steph walks you through from the very beginning. And so in this video, we're actually going to skip a little bit of that stuff and jump right into the wreath. So if you need the basics, definitely go check that out first. But without further ado, let's jump right in. Steph, welcome back to the show.
hey, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good.
So for those people who don't know, Steph and my natural inclination now is to say like we met recently and we started working together, but now it's like, no, we go way back now.
I know, we're like old buds. Like it
Yeah.
still feels like yesterday, but it's been a little while now.
Yeah. So a couple years ago, I found Steph's work on Instagram and I loved it. And I just like reached out to her and I was like, you want to teach a workshop together in real life? Because she lives about 5 hours away from me. And I selfishly wanted to learn watercolor, and I was like, well, I can learn her watercolor and she can learn my calligraphy, and it could be like the best collaboration ever.
Yeah, it was perfect. And I totally was selfish too. Like I really wanted to learn what you were doing. So it was perfect. Yeah.
And so now we've been teaching in-person workshops together for a while, and we've done a couple in Ottawa, a couple in Toronto, and it's always a lot of fun. But I mean, there's only so much you can do with in-person students. You know, we have so many people online who want to learn. So I'm happy to have you here again.
Yay.
And let's back up. So for anybody who doesn't know you, hasn't met you at any of those in-person workshops or seen any of the other stuff that we've done together in the past, can you give us a little rundown of who you are? Obviously your name is Steph, that's all I've said so far, and what you do and kind of the history of all that.
Sure. So hi everybody. So I'm Stephanie Fehrenbach. Just call me Steph. And I am a visual artist. I work in oil and watercolor. And I've been sort of like, art has always been my thing since I was a kid. Like I've always loved it. I went to school for fine art and I've been an oil painter for a long time. But then I just kind of like fell into watercolor sort of by accident. Like it was when I was getting married, and the watercolor craze I was really inspired by. And I just thought, I really want to make stuff for my wedding. So I thought, okay, I'm like looking at all these things that are so inspiring and I think I can do that. That doesn't seem that hard. And then I tried and it was like way harder than I thought. Even as an artist, like I thought, oh my gosh, that looked so easy, but it really, you know, it took a lot of practice. So it took some time, and I kind of taught myself my own sort of the way that felt simple and natural to me. Like I love to create things that are sort of loose and abstract, and just sort of kept learning, and then I met you and we started teaching together, and the rest is sort of history. Yeah.
So nowadays though, I've noticed that you've made this like switch, sort of, you're doing a lot more, it's acrylic or oil?
It's oil. Yeah.
Oil.
Yeah. So I do both. So my business is like, I do both. I do oil paintings and I work with galleries and I do shows and things. And then I also love to do watercolor like classes, and it's sort of like the other part of my business where I just really want to make simple things that feel approachable to people, because I know how intimidating it is when you start, even if you have an art background. So I really like, my goal in life is to let people like that feel that they can't do it, show them that you can, like to really simplify the process from the beginning and show you like just through practice you can get there, and it's not as scary as it seems.
Well, and I love that you brought that up, because I was going to say that, like, having taught with you now in person and with our online stuff, you have like a way of just making it look so simple and like not carefree, but loose. Like you're just so like, you know, don't overthink it and all that, which I think that people really resonate with. And I do. Like, I think it makes watercolor painting, especially for florals, a lot less intimidating. So I think that I should just take my face off here and let you show people how you do that.
Okay, yay, I'm excited. So is it okay if I just, because we've done basics before, like just like how to mix and all that stuff, can I just dive in and assume that maybe they've known that already? And we'll just
Yeah, actually. So for anybody who's watching this and hasn't ever learned watercolor or watercolor basics or anything, we didn't mention it yet, but Steph and I actually have a free course called Show Me Your Florals, where Steph does a 7-day, like every day you get a lesson on watercolors, and it starts from the very beginning. There's a supplies guide, there's like how to actually mix the paints and put water in it and all of that stuff. Like anything that you're asking questions about that you feel silly for is all in that course. And so I guess in this one, you'll just jump into doing a wreath. And so if it overwhelms people, go back to the basics.
Yeah. Go look at that first, because like I'll just dive in, like, and then we have more time to really focus on the wreath this time. And then if you really want to get into basics, then you can look at the stuff we've done before. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, let me take my face off here and we'll let you get into your lesson.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, so to get started, we're just going to set up our workstation. So I have my palette all clean and ready, and I've just laid out my colors in a rainbow. So the colors that I'm using today are the Cotman line of the Winsor & Newton brand, and I really like these tube paints because you can just squeeze out a bit on your palette and use it kind of wet right out of the tube, which is in my opinion, the most vibrant way of painting. But you can also let your colors dry on your palette and return to them later by just wetting your brush and adding to them. So they really do last a long time. So the colors that I'm using today are Permanent Rose, Cadmium Yellow, Pale, Cadmium Orange, Cadmium Red, Mauve, Dioxazine Violet, Cobalt Blue, Intense Blue, and Intense Green. So basically, you don't have to worry about following exactly the brand that I'm using or the color names that I'm using. I'm just giving them to you for reference, but really all you need to look for is pink, yellow, orange, red, light purple, dark purple, or maybe just one purple. A light blue, dark blue, maybe just one blue if you can find it, and a green. Okay? The palette I'm using is just a plastic palette from my local art store. It's got lots of wells to lay out your paint colors and little wells for mixing. So really anything that you find locally to you is great for that. Even just a ceramic plate can work great.
Steph, I have a question.
Yeah.
I know that people will ask this, and I know we covered it in Show Me Your Florals and our basic stuff too, but can you talk a little bit about using those dried watercolor palettes instead of the tubes? Because I know the tubes are really expensive and people who are just starting out don't always want to grab them.
Sure, yeah. So like tubes, they can be expensive if you're buying a whole big kit, but I like to start with sort of a smaller number of tubes and then work my way up. But the dried palettes are totally fine. They're really easy to find, and really basically like the tube paints are just liquid coming out of the tube, so they're kind of really vibrant that way, but you can also let them dry on your palette, right? And the dried palettes are exactly that. It's basically just the same paint that's been dried into a little cube form, so they're really just the same. You might just need to add a little bit extra water and swirl it around to get the same vibrant consistency, but they're really great paints. So I just opened up an Amazon store, so if you have any confusion about like what kind of paints to get, what supplies, I'm gonna have everything set up there. So you can just go there and look at the paints, the palettes, the paper, everything that you need to like get started. Watercolor is all recommended there.
Perfect. Okay, so you'll send me the link to that, and I'll put it down below for everybody. Okay. Yeah. Actually, one other like point about those dried palettes though is that I know that I wish I could grab it. It's over there, but I know that I've bought those like really crappy like Michael's $10 ones, and that's not what you're talking about, right? Like you say you can use the dried ones, but they should still be the like really high quality, like
try
the brand
to get
name
the best
ones.
Yeah, if you like I like to recommend, there's like Winsor & Newton just little puck paints. Like you can get I like to give them to my son like from the dollar store, and they're all, try not to use those because they're really chalky, and honestly they'll just make like they kind of are gritty when they come out. The colors aren't great. So that's just something like, try not to use those. Like I understand if you're on a budget, you have to do what you have to do, but honestly, it'll make a huge difference in your painting if you can invest a little bit more in supplies. And yeah, some things about those pre-mixed palettes though too, like ones with the cubes, sometimes they come all as a set and you don't get a good pink color. Sometimes they have like extra blacks and browns and things, which I don't use as much in my florals. I just mix those colors. So that's also why I gravitate to tubes, because you can really pick the colors that you want instead of just being given this kit. So that's something to watch out for. You might want to grab an extra pink or something like that.
Okay, cool. I'll take my face back off here and let you get back into it.
Thanks.
For paper, I love Arches. This is my favorite brand of paper. It's a 140-pound cold press, and this is a pad. It has 12 sheets, and it's great bright white paper, and it's got a little bit of a texture to it. So watercolor paper comes in 3 different surfaces. It can be hot press, which is very, very smooth. It can be cold press, which has a slight texture, or rough press, which has very, very bumpy texture. But this is sort of our happy medium cold press paper for abstract floral painting. For brushes, I like to use these Snap by Princeton brushes. They're short handle watercolor brushes. The short handle is nice just because you have more control that way while holding your brush. And I love the round brushes because they have a great pointed tip, which is really, really nice for creating detailed line work in your paintings. And as well, the rounded shape of the brush helps create these rounded shapes of leaves and flowers and things like that. So the sizes I'm using are just a 0 and a 6. Don't worry if you can't find those exact sizes. Just look for a very small detail brush and then sort of a medium size brush for your larger leaves and flowers. I'm also using just a regular HB pencil, and I have 2 water containers. So I like to keep one just for mixing my paints, and one I try to keep clear so that if I have to blot anything up, I have just a little bit of clear water to use, and I have lots of paper towel handy so that I can blot my excess paint and brushes on this. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is draw our circle guideline for the wreath. So this is just the cap for one of my water containers, but it's a perfect little circle that fits in my page. And I like to just use this as kind of like a guideline. I don't follow this circle exactly, but it just keeps me sort of in a rounded shape so I don't kind of deviate all over my page where I don't want to be. So I'm just going to stick that in the center and use my pencil very, very gently to trace a circle around. So I'm just going to dip my size 6 brush in the water, and we're going to start with some of the green leaves. Okay, so I'm just going to get a little bit of yellow going, and I can add a little bit of green to that. And I can add a tiny bit of orange too. Maybe a little more green. There we go. Okay, so I'm just gonna make it fairly pale to start, and you can always add more color later. Okay, so the first thing I'm gonna do is just sort of use the tip of my brush to draw kind of little stems that overlap my pencil line, but also curve out in different directions so that the pencil line is hidden. We can erase some of it if we see it, but the parts that we don't want to see later, we can just overlap with our stems. And I'm going to pull some of them down here and then overlap some in the middle. Okay, so I don't want to add too much. And I'm going to use the big width of my brush size to push down and create some leaf shapes. Okay, so I'm starting at the tip, and then I'm pushing down the whole width of my brush and pulling back up again. And changing that pressure uses the brush shape to make that leaf. Okay, and you can make another one that comes down like this. And I love that these leaves are kind of wide and rounded, and there's different shapes that I have here. So if you're not confident in just making the leaf shape, you can always use the tip of your brush to kind of draw like you're with a pencil and just fill it in. You know, like I'm always going back and fixing shapes with my brushes, so don't worry. You don't have to get it right exactly how you want it on the first try. Okay, so I'm just gonna keep making some of these leaves. Let's make a little one over here. Maybe a little more yellow. And let's add a little orange to this. And a tiny bit of mauve, because this one gets a little bit brown. The smaller leaf here has a little bit of brown in it. So if you add orange and yellow and mauve together, you get this kind of browny color. I'm going to add a little bit of green to it as well, though. And you can kind of fill in and tap in those leaves. And you can just use a little bit of this color, maybe dilute it a little bit, and you can spread that over some of the leaves that you've done, and that'll create a nice variation in a fall gradient look where it's not all just one color. And you can pull that color into the stem as well. Okay, so let's move on to another leaf color. So I'm gonna keep going with my size 6 brush, and I'm gonna make a little bit of an orange for the next leaves. So I'm gonna dip in my orange, maybe add a little bit of yellow to this. And I'm gonna pull in some of this brown just so it's not so bright. And we're gonna start by making these different sort of longer leaves. So this way, I'm gonna start away from my leaf, pull down a little bit longer, and pull up. So instead of creating these rounded leaves, they're a little bit more oval. And then you can fix the shape. You can create these little jagged edges if you like with the very tip of your brush. You can just sort of go on the edges like this. But I don't want them to look too feathery. Okay, so I'm going to pull up and make more leaves that come up this way. And it's just sort of hiding in behind these first leaves. Okay, so once I have that already done, I'm going to add some shading to it. So you can add a little bit of green. So let's make a new well and pull in some of that color. Maybe a little more yellow to it. And you can tap in a little bit of green in there. You can also tap in a bit of a darker orange. Maybe add some pink or a bit of red to that. And you can just go overlap. And really create some nice gradients there. I like to not cover the whole thing over top, so you get little pockets of where the base layer peeks through. I think that's really beautiful. Okay, so we're gonna move on and add a few more of these leaves. Let's add some on this side with, I like this kind of darker burgundy color. So I'm gonna add one or two just over on this side to balance that brightness. So let's pull this orange down here. Let's pull some of that here and add a little mauve to it. And a little bit of green. I think we need some more orange. I actually grabbed a bit too much orange. Okay, so actually what I want to do first is add some of this green, this color, this yellowy green. So I just diluted the green that I had on my palette. And I'm going to do that first by making a big leaf. Comes out to the side there and one up here. And then we can add some more purple or mauve and just overlap. Okay, and you can even add some some blue or purple to that and get an even more brown color and just tap that darkness in there. Okay, so I'm going to now move on to some green and move some of that brown in there, and we'll get a darker green again. And I'm just going to pull some of this in and some more leaves that just sort of curve around like this. And they get smaller as they get near the top. And let's add a few that are just smaller leaves that peek in around. Okay, so I like to vary the shape of my leaves. If you want to have even more detailed ones, you can move on to your size 0 brush, but right now I like this medium size with my size 6. And I'm just going to keep pulling this green and wrapping those leaves around my circle shape. Okay, so now I've got that sort of base color in. I can add some more shading. So I'm going to go into my yellows again and just mix that with a bit of the brown. So I've got a browny yellow color, and that's sort of nice to add these little fall tones in there. And just layer that over. Making some more leaves in there. Okay. Maybe a little more yellow. I kind of want one that's sticking up here a little bit. Okay, that looks good. Okay, so I can move on to adding a little bit more oranges in here just to carry this color in around. So I'm going to mix some orange into that color that I had here at the base and add a little more mauve to it. And I'm just going to overlap some of my leaves here with a little bit more orangey tones. And I can go back to my orange and add a few more leaves. Overlapping here. So when you're overlapping leaves, you really want to wait for the base to dry. So I'll kind of waited for these big ones to dry a little bit more before I was ready to overlap these orangier ones. So as I'm working my way around, I'm letting this dry, and then I can come back to it. Okay. If you don't wait for it to dry, sometimes it'll just sort of spread and these color bleeds will happen, which is nice, but you might not want that in every area of your painting. Okay. Yeah, let's add a little bit more purple to this, make it really dark brown, and just tap that in around the stem and add some shading there. Okay, so I just want to complete this section of my wreath with more of a yellowy tone. So I'm going to go into like this more of this color leaf. So I'm going to my yellow, add a little tiny bit of green to it. You really don't need much green when you're adding it to the yellow, especially if you're using intense green. It is, like the name says, very intense. And then I just pulled in a tiny bit of that orange color. And then you want to dilute it. And I'm going to pull in some leaves that sort of curve in this way and up. And just sort of overlap again. We don't need too many, just enough to pull and finish that side of our wreath. Okay, and I'm just going to go back into my orange and mix that in there. And you can dab a little bit of that in there for some variation in the leaves. And you might want to add a little bit of green. And you can tap that in there as well. You can always fix the shapes. Let's add some bigger ones in here. Okay, and I'm going to add some that come down. Okay, so we're ready to add our berries in, and I loved these rich blue colored ones and these really nice orange ones as well. So we're going to use our size 0 brush for this, and I'm just going to get it wet and mix a little bit of my intense blue, some of the purple, and you can add a little bit of green to that, maybe a little bit of this brown as well. You just want a really rich dark color. And you can dilute it a little bit. And I'm just going to pick a few spots. You don't need a ton of them, but I wanted to add a few up here. So I'm just going to overlap with some small circle shapes. Just use the tip of your brush. You can always start with 3 and then add more if you need. Okay, so I'm just starting with the berry shapes, and then I'm going to add in the stems of them later. And let's add some in down here. And a few in here. Okay, so I'm going to use this brown color. You can add a little bit of mauve to it to make it slightly more reddish brown. And you just want to connect your little berries, a bit of a stem, as if they're kind of all connected to each other. And curving, maybe I'll add a few more. You can let the stem sort of guide you where you want to add some more of them too. I want to pull some around this way and a few of them down this way. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my blue. I'm going to add a little more purple, blue, some of that brown to it, and just overlap a few more. Okay, just fix the shape of that one there. Okay, so these little berries have leaves on them too, so I'm just going to use my size 6 brush and use the brown with a little bit of green. And let's add some orange to that. Maybe a bit of mauve. And I'm just going to add a few little leaves. Connected to these berry stems. Okay, so I'm just going to add just a few of those little orange ones in. So I'm going back to my size 0 brush, maybe add a little bit of red to it, to your orange mixture on your palette, and just dilute that. I'm going to add a touch of that brown. And I'm just going to add a few oranges kind of over in this area. A little more orange. And a little more red. You can go right over top and overlap. And add 1 or 2 of them in here. Okay, and I want to make these just a slight bit darker, so I'm going to add a little bit of mauve to that mixture and just tap that into my berries. And then I can add your stem. Just like that. So at this point I just kind of take a look at my wreath, and if there's anything else I want to add, I could add a few little dainty leaves in there. Maybe you'll dilute some of this and use my small brush to just create a few little leaves that curve up and around. So feel free to just play and overlap. That's what's great about leaves. You can just keep going. And I'll pull some there and just a few out to this side. Okay, there you go.
The fact that you can just like whip that out and just like have this beautiful idea in your head of what a wreath would look like just like floors me every single time. So like how do you actually, okay, maybe it's an abstract thing that you just have a natural ability to picture in your head and it comes with time, but like what would be your advice for people who don't have like a concrete idea in their head of what they want it to look like on the page? I mean, they can copy yours, but if they wanted to make their own.
For sure. So like so really what I did for this, I took my son, who's 2.5, and we just went on a little nature walk. And we went around our neighborhood and we picked different leaves and berries that we found. And I was literally like grabbing them off the ground. And honestly, like just go out in your neighborhood and see what inspires you. I think that's the best thing, because sometimes just looking at a picture or trying to come up with something in your head isn't always easy. So you have to, I'm really visual, right? So you got to see it. So I just pick those things from nature, and then when it's right in front of you, it's just easier to sort of like look at it from different angles and see the shapes. And then I also don't always have a plan. Like part of the freedom of painting is just letting yourself make mistakes, and you'll watch as I go. Like I don't always know exactly how it's going to turn out at the end, but you just keep going with it. Sometimes you're not loving things as you go, but you just keep working with it and until you get to the end result.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, we didn't do this in this video because it would end up being like a full course if we did that. But in the, like we mentioned, our free course, Show Me Your Florals, but we also have done workbooks together where people can learn how to do this kind of stuff. And usually what I find really helpful in those is that you break down how to paint each flower before you put it all into a composition, which is like, as much as you want to be able to just go out and like pick a flower or whatever, I think most people need to like, okay, teach me how to do that exact flower and then teach me how to put it into a wreath. And so like, if anybody is watching that wreath and is like, oh my God, I could never just like whip that out. There's step-by-steps in every other thing that Stephanie do.
Yes. So it's always like, it's not only step by step in the video that we do. Yeah, everything is broken down so you can see piece by piece. You do the stem here, this side of the leaf, this side of the leaf. So it's really broken down and you can see how it's gonna look. Oh yeah, here's our examples. Yeah.
I was like, oh, I think I have one. So like, yeah, let's say in one of our workbooks, for example, Steph teaches how to do a rose, and there's like piece by piece how to do it. And then it gets like deeper and deeper into the process. And then at the end of the book teaches how to actually put it all together into.
Yeah. So like if you're brave and you want to just dive into the final thing right away, some people do that, but I find it's like really great to just keep practicing the individual pieces. And then when you get to try to put it together, you feel more confident in how you're going to do it. Yeah.
Totally.
Start at the beginning.
Totally. So, okay, so we've mentioned it a few times, but if people want to learn the basics, the Show Me Your Florals course that Steph and I do is like, we do it live a couple times a year where we go through with everybody for the 7 days and we send you emails, and it's all kind of like a group experience that we do together. So if you're watching this as it goes live on the Friday that, you know, if you're a regular watcher of the show and you know that this comes out on Fridays and you're watching, the next live one is starting in about a week. And so if you go to showmeyourflorals.com, you can sign up, and I'll put that all down below too. But if you're watching this in the future sometime and you're like, oh crap, I missed the live experience, you can still sign up anytime you want and get access to everything. We just don't always go through it day by day with you. So all those basics are always available thanks to the lovely Steph. And hopefully the wreath like just gives you inspiration for how easy it can be and how, you know, how just like kind of carefree and fun it can be. So thank you so much again, as always, Steph, for coming on. And yeah, I mean, we know you'll be back.
I hope so. I love painting with you guys. It's always fun working with you guys.
Okay, I'll talk to you later.
Okay, bye.
Bye.